All right, good afternoon, artists. Welcome to CCI's Business of Art Sampler Platter. Today's topic is branding with SUE BELL YANK. I'm Allison Wiper. I'm Artist Knowledge Manager at the Center for Cultural Innovation. I want to point out as we get started here, as folks are coming in, that we are recording and we will upload this video to CCI's YouTube channel, which is at CCI_arts. You're welcome to turn your camera on or off during the presentation, and you're welcome to drop any questions in the chat as we go. Before we get started, just a little intro to CCI for those that don't know us. The Center for Cultural Innovation was founded in 2001 to promote knowledge sharing, networking, and financial independence for individuals in the arts. Our signature program, The Business of Art, is designed to enhance the business skills of artists and entrepreneurs working across the creative disciplines. Taught by art business leaders with both commercial and nonprofit experience, the Business of Art curriculum is rooted in the idea that your art business is driven by two elements: your core values and the people who value what you do. Participants learn key concepts involved in goal setting, business models, marketing and self-promotion, money management, legal issues, strategic planning, and project financing. So today's workshop is a highlight from what is normally a 30-hour training series. The longer workshops are more interactive with breakouts and conversation, whereas today you'll receive what's basically more of a short lecture. So again, we're going to invite you to drop your questions in the chat. If your questions remain unanswered at the end of this presentation, we invite you to sign up for CCI's monthly Business of Art office hours. The next one is coming up on March 29th, this time, 12 noon Pacific. You can learn more about CCI, view upcoming workshops and grant opportunities, and purchase the Business of Art workbook at cciarts.org. And for those interested in the full 30-hour training series, watch out for our annual fall 10-week series, which will take place September through November 2023. And registration will open in the summer. So keep an eye on our website, follow us on social, sign up for our newsletter if you want to learn about that. Just a heads up, that program always sells out. So if you're interested, make sure you sign up early. CCI has offices in San Francisco and Los Angeles, but our staff work remotely from across the US. And today I'm calling in from Echo Park, Los Angeles. And so I just want to take a moment to honor the Tongva, Kizh, Tataviam, and Chumash peoples on whose land I am now living, and the elders, both past and present, who have stewarded this land through the generations. And I'd like to additionally acknowledge my own ancestors' role in the colonization of these and other traditional lands, and the lands that we're occupying through the virtual space, and the ways in which the technologies we are using to connect today are part of a continuing history of colonization. So now I'd like to welcome SUE BELL YANK, who is a core Business of Art trainer and the editor and a contributor to the 3rd edition of the Business of Art workbook, which looks like this. SUE is also executive director at Clockshop LA. SUE?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. I've chosen for this sampler of a much longer session that I teach during the 10-week course to really focus on branding and social media. And so we'll take a quick look at our agenda today. Can everyone see the screen okay, the slides? Okay, and I do definitely reiterate Allison's invitation to drop questions in the chat. I'll try as best as I can to kind of work them in throughout talking, but we will move fairly quickly today since it's a short period of time. But I really wanted to hone in and focus in on branding and social media, because those are really the two big pieces that I get a lot of questions about during the longer training. And so that's really what we'll be focusing in on today. There is a lot more to marketing, obviously. There's email marketing, there's how you deal with press, there's refining your pitch for when you're actually going out there and trying to make opportunities happen. And those are all things that we cover in that much longer workshop, and also are covered in detail in the book. So definitely take advantage of the office hours or the other offerings CCI has for even more. But we'll also try to leave as much time as possible at the end for some questions, but we'll get right to it. So just so you know who's talking to you, because obviously people approach marketing in a lot of different ways from different contexts. I myself really do come from the nonprofit world. That's where sort of my heart is, and specifically working with artists directly. But I have had experience in a number of other places as well. So my background is kind of in arts education and pedagogy. I kind of came up through the Hammer Museum and taught at UCLA for many years. I worked at the Oprah Winfrey Network for a couple of years, which I sort of call my like communications school, but it was paid, which was really nice. And that really helped me get a view of how a very large business, you know, undertakes communications, which was an interesting kind of contrast to a lot of the institutions and nonprofits that I have worked within in the past. Most recently, I was at 18th Street Arts Center, where I was deputy director and had communications. I oversaw all communications and audience development strategy as part of my work there. And if you're not familiar with 18th Street, it is an arts organization that does service dozens of artists who are in residence there, both local and international. And so that really was a wonderful opportunity for me to be on the ground with many different artists who all had many, many different varied careers, and was able to work individually with folks around their own approach to marketing communications. I currently am the executive director of Clockshop. I'm also a Glendale Arts and Culture Commissioner. So I've seen things from that city side as well, you know, for artists who are interested in working with cities or with governments in different ways. And then I have my own writing practice as well. So please do look up any of those orgs if you're not familiar. I'm going to start a little bit with what I've learned about arts marketing. So again, you can kind of see the context where I'm coming from. And these are a few of the different types of events that I have done full marketing plans for over the years. And from e-courses, you know, it's a 6 weeks e-course with Breanne Brown for Oprah Winfrey that had, you know, 40,000 students each time we did it. And that had a much larger marketing budget than I think I've ever had access to ever. So that was a whole interesting kind of strategy of how you use that large budget in digital advertising. Then to, you know, my current organization, we have an enormous kite festival, which has a press strategy. It has online social media for months. We do on the ground, like, you know, pounding the pavement and handing out flyers. I mean, the whole 9 yards for that festival. And we had nearly 5,000 people come to it last year. To much, much smaller events like Listening by Moonrise, or this conversation with artist Patty Chang that was virtual, you know, and I guess my point here is that each one of these, it's very contingent on where it's coming from. It's very contingent on the resources that you have at your disposal, on the budget you might or might not have, you know, and what audience you're really trying to reach. So there's no, you know, there's no magic bullet in marketing. And that is definitely something that I try to underscore again and again. It is very, very contextual, and it is very much about connecting, you know, connecting the product or the person or the experience to the audience that's going to really resonate with. You know, it's a matchmaking game in a lot of ways. So, you know, creativity and out of the box thinking can go really far. This is how I sort of think about marketing as an art. You know, you really kind of try to push the envelope, you try to do new things, you think about how can I experiment, you know, shake it up a little bit, try new things. Authenticity is super important. You know, people can see right through a kind of inauthentic marketing campaign. So being true, as Allison mentioned in the beginning, to yourself, to your values, you know, to who you are as a person, and crafting the message that says that clearly, that's the real trick, you know. But you don't have to invent a new persona. You don't have to invent new activities just for the purpose of marketing. It's really about taking where you are, who you are, what you want to offer, and finding the best, clearest way to describe that to the people who that might resonate with. You're marketing the value of your product. This is key, because I think these things get so fuzzy, especially with social media, and we'll be talking about this a little bit. So your talent, the work you create, your vision, you know, whatever that might be in your particular arena, that is what you're marketing. But don't confuse that with the value of your personhood, of you as a person, you know. And that's, I think, where things can get very messy on social media, and where I've heard in the past, lots of artists feel very anxious, you know, about that kind of the fuzzing of the boundaries between the personal and their work, and how that can happen. And so I think getting that very clear with yourself, that this is part of your job as a, you know, as a small business owner, really somebody who is promoting your work and trying to find that correct audience. And that is not really indicative of who you are as a person. But at the same time, I think you do need to be confident that your audience is out there, right? They are there. There are people who want what you're offering. And so the trick is figuring out where they are and how you connect with them, right? Now there's the other piece to marketing, which is the science. So I always like to think of it, it's an art, you know, you can get real creative about it. You can experiment, try new things, but it's also, you need to really be looking at the numbers and looking at the data and seeing where are you effective. Because otherwise you're just throwing spaghetti on the wall all the time, and you don't really know what works, you don't know what didn't work, you don't know what is actually resonating with your audience. So working in this kind of check-in with yourself, you know, a little bit of this data analysis, scientific method, you know, experiment, but figure out what worked, right? And then how can I grow what actually did work? It's very based on goals, actions, and outcomes. Right? You're not marketing just for the sake to market. You want something to happen, right? You have a goal. You want people to click, or you want people to buy stuff, or you want people to come to an event. You know, we call that butts and seats in marketing. Like, what are we going for? Are we going for press? Are we going for butts and seats? Are we going for a story, right? So you have to get that clear with yourself. You're not just putting stuff out there just to put it out there. Even when you're putting it out there, and it's more about awareness, that in itself is its own goal that can be measured, right? How many more people are aware of you, even if they haven't taken action yet. And those are things you can measure. So that's really important with anything that you do, because otherwise you're just wasting energy kind of making videos and putting stuff out there, and you're not really sure what it's doing or why. Use a menu of tactics strategically. Gauge their effectiveness and grow your reach over time. It seems really simple, but if you do approach it in kind of more of a scientific, methodical way, then I find that takes a lot of the pressure and anxiety off of my shoulders. You know, when you're like, oh, how do I guess what the new trend is and whatever? It's like, no, you don't need to worry about that, right? You have a specific goal. You're trying to reach it. You're trying a few different things, and you're seeing what works, right? And so just routinize it, right? Routinize it into your schedule. Figure out how much time you have to pay attention to this. Set aside that little chunk of time each week, even if it's an hour, even if it's a half an hour. Just, you know, set it aside and be like, okay, I'm going to look at all my marketing insights right now. Our current kind of world makes that extremely easy and usually free, right? To be able to do that. You can look on Google Analytics, you can look on all of your social media platforms are going to have insights. Your websites, if you have one, has insights built into it. It may take a little bit of work on the front end to set that up, but it is there and it is available. And is something that you just schedule into your day to just check in on, on a weekly basis. There's all these strategies, right? There's earned versus paid media, there's press, there's social media, there's email marketing or other direct marketing. I mean, your audience that you want to reach, like passing out flyers might be the best way to do that, right? Because it's at a school. So you have to really think about who are you trying to reach and where are they? And what is going to reach them the most effectively? If you're posting on Instagram and your audience is at the elementary school down the street, that's not going to be effective, obviously, right? Probably going to be more effective if you go walk over there with a big stack of flyers and say, can you please pass these out to all the parents? So that also is, using those tactics strategically, right? You think about, don't waste your time doing stuff you don't need to be doing. That is not going to help you reach your goal or reach your audience that you really need to reach. Now, that being said, if we take that school example, maybe you have another goal, which is I want more people to be aware of the really cool educational stuff I'm doing. Well, that's another goal, right? And then actually it might be the people on Instagram that you're connected to that already know your work in one arena, and you're like, I want to introduce them to my educational work. And then that might be a whole different kind of marketing campaign that you do for that audience. But you have to just be clear about what it is that you're doing. Be willing to change, update, and improve your message. Again, if it's not working, don't take it personally, right? Every company on the planet who does any kind of marketing does this all the time. They're changing the color of the button on the website that you press to see if it's going to get more clicks, right? So be very flexible and be very willing to shift things a little bit. It may just be the way you worded a certain sentence. People got kind of mucked up and they didn't know what you were saying. And so you're willing to kind of revise it, change it, be fluid in that way. The other thing with marketing that I've found is it is best done collaboratively, and it is best done in dialogue with others. So never be afraid of asking for help and for feedback. I mean, even if it's your mom, and you're like, pass her a paragraph and you're like, does this make any sense to you? That's really helpful, actually. Even more helpful is, somebody who's in the audience group that you want to reach, who might be a friend of yours. You're like, I want to reach like 40-year-old moms, in this region of the country. Do you know anybody like that? Can you pass some of your marketing materials in front of them and see what their reaction is, right? So do it collaboratively, do it in dialogue. None of us, as people who run businesses, small or otherwise, are going to know everything. And so it is also important to know what you don't know and to know what you're not comfortable with, and make sure that you're getting yourself some support in those areas. Either you're training yourself up, or you're getting a young person who really understands TikTok because you feel like you need to be on TikTok, and you're like, I hate TikTok. I don't want to do it. I don't even want to log into it. But maybe you pay a younger person, a small budget to produce a couple videos for you per month. That's fine too, right? You're managing the strategy. You don't need to know everything. All right. So let's talk a little bit about brand. Once you have this goal, right, this product, this action, this thing that you want to get out there to the world, one of your first steps is going to figure out how are you going to package it, right? What is the copy that's going to go with? What are the images you want to have attached to that thing that you're marketing? And how does that connect back to your core values, right? And the things that you really want to get out there about yourself, about your context, in terms of what people, how you want people to start to engage with you and what you have to offer. Here are just a few things to start thinking about when you're thinking about branding, and then we're going to go into a variety of different examples. And again, just a reminder, if we come up with questions, then we'll, I'll try to work those in. So if you have questions as these come up, please drop them in. One thing about the brand to think about is there's all the logistical aspects of it, right? The images, the fonts you want to use, the colors. And I think people can get very wrapped up in those pieces. But really what you're thinking about is like, what are you promising to your audience, right? What kind of experience are you promising? What kind of feeling are you promising? If they're going to hang your art on their wall, what is that going to do for them, right? And so these are all sort of things to start thinking about when you're crafting how you're going to brand something or how you're going to market something, from the micro to the macro. So from your whole website and whole kind of presence, or from the one event that you're going to do next Saturday, how do you want to kind of get the message across about that? Knowing the landscape is really important. So taking note when you see something that you really resonate with. I mean, pay attention to that, just you as an audience member or as a person, when you see somebody do something that you're like, wow, that's great, or like it sticks in your mind, or there's something really compelling about it. And that's not saying steal it, but try to identify what about it do you like, what about it is resonating with you. And is that something that you could, take and sort of run with and make it, your own kind of unique idea. So I think all of those things are fair game. And understanding what you don't like is also really important too. If you're just like, I feel like it's very inauthentic for me or against my core values to be doing all of this marketing on social media, then that's a choice that you're making, right? And you can sort of figure out different ways around that to reach the kind of audience that you want to reach. Another thing to sort of think about is, how your core values are working into that. And then what aren't you paying attention to within your brand? Like what opportunities are missing? Probably most of you have some kind of presence out there already that you're working on. And so this might be a good opportunity if you're looking to shake things up a little bit, is to think about, okay, what opportunities am I missing to tell my story, right? Are there some parts that, a blurb about myself that I wrote 10 years ago that really could use a little bit of rethinking, right? To kind of describe who I am now or what I have to offer right now. So those are the things to kind of think about for yourself as you're undertaking revising or renewing your brand. Another few aspects to consider: the best platforms for your audience. We talked about that a little bit, and that may not be all of them because you have limited capacity, you have limited bandwidth. And so what are you really going to pour your attention into? And I'll show you a few examples of some folks who have decided to have certain platforms and not have other ones, and that's working for them and for their audience. Your image selection and quality. I feel like this is something that hugely distinguishes successful marketing from not successful marketing. Especially in the visual arts and performing arts realm. So it's worth investing in. If you feel like you don't have great images right now, it's definitely worth thinking about that, auditing that for yourself, and investing in really good images that are compelling in and of themselves. Think about your other assets that you might have. Do you have audio clips? Do you have video? Do you have testimonials? Again, this is very dependent on your work and what medium it might be in, but are there other ways to describe your work that could be compelling to an audience or reveal more about what you do? And not all of those will be, applicable for everybody, but it's something to think about. And then coherence across platforms, I think, is also important. If people see your Instagram page and your website side by side, does it look like the same person? You know, for some people, that's an easy yes. For others, it's like, maybe not, you know, maybe my website is pretty old and it's actually more my Instagram that's up to date on who I am, you know? So that's something to think about is it coherent? Does it really look like everything that you're doing is coming from the same person or from the same place? Clear and accessible calls to action. This is another huge misstep I see. You know, I'm getting messages to buy someone's artwork on their website. And then it's like really hard to do that. Like I can't figure out where to click, or the payment system doesn't work very well, or whatever it is. That is so important. So how can you make it as easy as possible for your audience to do anything? Even asking them to click off of a certain page and onto another page is too much for people. Never underestimate, you know, the laziness of your audience, to be perfectly honest. So the easier you can make it to engage or to, you know, live up to your call to action, the better. And then tone, not just what you say, but how you say it is really important. Another thing I'll throw in there is language justice and accessibility. That is also something that you want to think about depending on who your audience is. You know, are you doing an event where you know a significant number of the population might be bilingual or monolingual speakers of another language? You know, then you might want to seriously consider having that in multiple languages. And so always thinking about that is super important. That's something my own organization is working towards, is really trying to have a lot more multi-language content to reach our multi-language audience that we want to reach, right? All right, so we'll jump into some of the examples, and I tried to just pick a really wide variety. My world is the visual arts, contemporary arts world, so it's definitely going to skew really heavily in that direction. But I tried to throw in a couple other kinds of artists as well. Most of these artists are LA based or Oakland based. So I tried to stick with California artists. But here we have Genevieve Gangyard, a photographer. Genevieve is a mixed race person and often will use her own body as the central figure in her photography, which you can see her like formal art prints on the, let's see if you can see on the left side. And then the other side is her Instagram. And so some of her artwork is mixed in there, but there's also a lot of other stuff too. Some inspiration, some, you know, selfies, some hanging out with friends, you know, behind the scenes sort of thing. So you get a more of a variety on the Instagram versus her website, which has the formal art pieces. But what I wanted to really point out about this example is the coherence. I mean, this is very coherent. The image selection and quality is excellent. It is clearly very well curated in terms of what she's choosing to post. And it all very much relates back to her work as an artist. So I think that's something to kind of note. And not only to her work as an artist, but also to what she's trying to accomplish with her artwork, which has a lot of, you know, commentary on class, on race, on context, social context within the US and different places within the US. And so I think she does a really great job of that in terms of some of this image selection. Another example that we have is Breanne Brown, who I mentioned before. I had worked with on an e-course. Now she's like, you know, a totally different kind of person, but I would say also running a small business, you know, an author, a teacher, a researcher. But one thing that I wanted to point out about this example is the tone. Just the tone of the language itself is so consistent with who she says she is and her core values. She's all about courage and vulnerability, right? And how you embrace vulnerability to sort of become a stronger and more courageous and empathetic person. And when you kind of dig deeper into her website, you understand everything's in the first person, right? So there's not a bio about her that is like, Breanne Brown is a research professor at the university. Like, it's not sort of held at a distance. It's very personal. And so you have a very personal window into, and believe me, this is all intentionally crafted to be this way, right? But it speaks very clearly to those values and to the work that she's doing. There's also this piece that I really like on her website called My Story, and she just kind of like almost makes fun of herself a little bit. She has all these old photos about herself, and she's, you know, she has this 1986 discovered shaper spray, the higher the hair, the closer to God, you know, and that sort of speaks to her cultural context. It's a little bit self-deprecating, you know, but she's being vulnerable, right? She's like, it's all out there. Like, this is me, and I'm putting it out there for you. So thinking about your tone, I think, is really important, and not just adopting the tone of like academic art or the art world or how you think it should sound, but what language is very authentic to you and what you're trying to get out there in the world. And it may be that that authenticity, actually, you do it in several languages. Another example that I have is 2 Indigenous chefs from Oakland, and they recently opened the Cafe Ohlone at Berkeley. They, as a collective, are called Makamham, and they're Ohlone chefs, and their whole kind of values are around sustaining traditional Ohlone culture, especially culture that has been lost, and using their culinary skills and traditions and a lot of historical research and kind of speaking with elders. They've been able to resuscitate a lot of the indigenous foodways that have been lost over the years. And so that's kind of their whole set of values. But one of the ways that they've been able to show this is by using a lot of the Ohlone language on their website. I don't have an example right here, but I do encourage you to check it out on your own at makamham.com. And so, you know, that's one of the things that they're doing. And I found that compelling in terms of really kind of putting your money where your mouth is, in terms of, you know, we want to resuscitate our traditional culture. And so we're going to actually be putting the language of our traditional culture on this website and making sure that that's coming through. And so that might be an opportunity, you know, another way to sort of show some of your core values that are important to you. These are some of the images as well that show up on their website and on their Instagram, which is, again, very consistent and very like very aligned with one another. So, you know, there's both some of these like ancestral or historical kind of investigations that they undertake, but as well as just the beauty of the raw ingredients, as well as the food that they end up creating and cooking. And so very carefully curated and selected imagery that helps, you know, completely underscore. It's not chosen just because it's beautiful. It's really about underscoring each of these values and each of these parts of their mission. Another Oakland-based artist who is, again, I think, another really interesting example for me. And one of the reasons I wanted to show her example, she also has a very active and well-followed Instagram, is I often get the question from folks who do lots of different things. How do I brand this together under one hat? And I think that Fabiana Rodriguez does a very good job of this. She does a lot of different things. She is not just an artist, but she's also an activist. She also speaks a lot. She's the executive director of the Center for Cultural Power. So lots of different kind of angles to what it is she does, but she brings it together in a very kind of cohesive way that I think is fairly clearly laid out. And so that's somebody who I just wanted to bring in as an example, because I think as artists or as small business owners, we really do wear a lot of hats. I mean, you may create art, you may also teach art, you may also, be doing events or working in a collective or working with a collaborative and have all of these multiple, you may have a day job too, which works into your practice in some way. So we all have kind of these multiple different things we're doing. And if we're able to find a way to bring those together, to kind of show us as a whole person, and then have different ways that you could access those different pieces, I wanted to bring forth an example that I felt did a pretty good job of that. And then we have some artists who really, I wanted to show, and this kind of leads into our social media portion, really don't have much of a web presence. Jun Wook is a trans artist living here in Los Angeles, does really incredible and multivalent work from performance. She has a mutant salon kind of performance series that's ongoing. She also performs as an act called Sheena Cherner. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Yeah, just does, but also has these incredibly compelling sculptural practices. And so her work ends up in a lot of different places. But I thought it was interesting, really web presence wise, it's a very much like an artist website, but you get such a deeper sense of practice on Instagram and throughout kind of the social media presence, and really get a very deep insight into who this artist is, what they're doing out in the world, and it's told in a very authentic way. Rafa Esparza is another artist I admire, who actually does not have a website at all, and just has an Instagram account. And so I think that's also an option. That's something that I wanted to put out there as an example. It's a very well followed Instagram account. I think it does a good job of giving a full picture of what is quite a complex and again, multivalent practice, artistic practice. By showing, there's behind the scenes, there's collaborators that come into it. There's, performative events, there's also artwork, paintings, all sort of different ways of showing an artistic practice. And it's not all like the final version of the work. So I think depending on your level of comfortability with displaying process, I think that's also something that some artists have really found a lot of benefit to, is sort of displaying their process, and through doing that, revealing really who they are, their values, where they stand as an artist and as a person. Not everyone's comfortable with that. Some artists really prefer to just have only the finished work out there. And I think there's ways to kind of think around that. But I think it can really let an audience in a totally different way, if some of that process is also being, unveiled. And then my kind of last example for the day is Emma Robbins, who is an artist and an activist, Indigenous activist. She's the executive director of the Navajo Water Project, and also runs a community space called the Chapter House LA, which is for multi-generational Indigenous communities and allies here in LA. Los Angeles has one of the largest Indigenous populations, I think of cities in the country, urban Indigenous populations, but Indigenous people from all over the Americas. And so that's kind of the space Chapter House LA is filling. She's Dine, and I wanted to bring forth this example because her following is not huge. I mean, it's not quite 4,000 people, but if you look at all the posts, they're incredibly heavily engaged with. And that's part of why the title for this sampler was your 1,000 biggest fans, you know, because that's often what one benchmark that I've heard is if you have, you know, 32,000 followers or something, but most of them were bought, then you're actually not going to have great engagement on any of your social media platforms. But if you have 1,000 people and they're all really into you, like you're golden, right? That is a really great marketing tool for you. So I think for me, just thinking about that really helps take the pressure off of this game of like, you know, trying to be an influencer or something, or trying to get like thousands and thousands and thousands of followers. And if you don't, then it's not worth it. Which I think some people, especially in some of the performing arts professions, like feel that pressure sometimes. But I think you can do really well and actually have a very authentic, you know, kind of relationship with social media with just, you know, a couple thousand or 1,000 like really engaged people who really want to hear what you have to say. So that's something I wanted to bring up. I also really like her account because it is so very integrated. And I think that's another thing, you know, to consider for yourself. Like, do you want an account that's really just for your business? You know, is there a way to kind of include all aspects of some of the things that you do and who you are as a person, you know, and that's another way to let people in. And then this is an example completely off of social media, but I thought also was like a good example of branding is I've known folks who have a lot of success with just a newsletter and really just pouring time and energy into that newsletter, making sure that that's very clearly branded. And it's another way that you can get across, you know, a lot of your values and a lot of your positionality in the world through, you know, a very well-crafted newsletter. And I particularly like Carol Zoe's because she has, you know, all of these interesting sort of recommendations that she includes. And it's also not that long, you know, so it's like pretty short, pretty readable. And then it's like, here's some really cool books I'm reading. Here's some artists that I have a big crush on, you know, and in a way that kind of also displays to me what Carol's thinking about, like, what is she interested in, you know, and as somebody who's a fan, then I can also check out some of these other things too. So I wanted to include this just to underscore that it doesn't have to be social media that you're focusing on. It doesn't have to necessarily be one of these platforms. It could also be a newsletter, right? Or some kind of like way to reach that audience in an authentic way. And that should still be branded and still be something that you're really thinking through how you want to present it and how it's going to resonate with your audience. All right, we're getting low on time, but I'm going to transition right into some of my very quick social media tips. One of the metrics that I've heard is that, you know, 30% of what you post can be like straight up self-promotion, but actually 70% should really be more about showing but not telling your core values. You know, how do you show them? How do you display them? Maybe letting people into your process, maybe letting people into your interests or the way that you are thinking about things. This is something that I think can really round out your social media account. People get tired of just constant self-promotion. I think that's very much a reality, you know? So if you're just getting kind of the same flyer about the same event over and over again, you sort of tune it out, right? But then if somebody's like showing you a cool video of how they were setting up the room before the event and all the fun people they were working with, then you're like, oh, wow, you would get a totally different window into what that experience might be like. So I think the showing, not telling, I really try to take that to heart myself, to kind of really engage people in that experience before. Short and engaging, that's also really important. Telling people right up front what you want them to do. I think that's important. I like being, straightforward about stuff with people, like, hey, really want you to come to this, and here's why. Responding and engaging. I mean, again, this is kind of depending on your own bandwidth and what you have the ability to do. But, if people comment a nice comment, it's always nice to reply to them. Same if people email you, it's really nice to reply. Surprising how little people actually do that. And so when you are a person who replies, who shows up, who engages, that means something. Definitely video. The algorithms do tend to favor those, thinking about Instagram Reels and TikToks. That's just like a reality. If you're playing in that space, then it's good to get comfortable with video. If you decide not to play in that space, more power to you, and you'll find other ways to market to your audience. Same with stories, especially if you are really thinking carefully about image selection and having, your Instagram grid look a certain way, or the way that you post things look a certain way, then stories can actually be really helpful to like do those quick things, oh, here's a cool other person that I found, or here's a cool, doing that a little bit more fluidly can be helpful. Think outside the box and experiment. I mean, I think we all went through this really interesting year where like Twitter kind of imploded and stuff was, and everyone's like, what the heck is going on? And, people are leaving different social media platforms in droves, and it still sort of feels like this big, everything's in flux right now. So again, thinking a little bit outside the box, thinking about where your audience is and how you want to reach them, that might require a little bit of research, but also maybe some new stuff, some new interesting things that you may not have thought about before. Maybe LinkedIn is actually a good platform for you to get into, depending on what your business is, and who you're trying to reach. Maybe Substack, doing that kind of writing on a regular basis, or posting where it sort of lands in people's inboxes and you can get subscribers. Maybe that's actually more your speed than an Instagram or something. So, maybe like putting out really cool posters around your neighborhood and having a QR code on there. And, like there's multiple different ways, I think, to reach people. And so thinking and experimenting is going to be really key. And finally, just really being true to yourself. You may know that tons of selfies and like, sort of having your shirt down a little low is going to like get a lot more engagement, but you may be like, I do not want to do that. And don't do that, if that's not you. Be authentic to really who you are and what you're comfortable with sharing about yourself too. There's no need to kind of do things that make you uncomfortable just for the likes. So I think that's really important. And I try to, tell everybody that like, there's ways to be really successful and reach that audience that you really want to reach while still being true to yourself. And they have to do with, what we talked about in the beginning, with just being methodical about it, being flexible, experimenting, seeing what's working, building on that, and then continuing to craft your strategy for yourself. And that kind of leads to the last point, which is data. Do make sure that you're paying attention to the numbers and what is really working, and you may find that this post that you got super excited about, and you thought the picture was really cool and everything, didn't do that well. And so, okay, that's a data point, right? You can kind of work that in, and maybe you want to try it again because you really loved it so much and you're going to tweak things a little bit. You can try that, you could try something a little bit different. But if you're not paying attention to the numbers, then you're just kind of throwing things out there and not necessarily being as effective as you might want to be. So one of my big recommendations, and I'm wrapping up, so we'll have a little bit of time for questions. How can your core values translate to tone and visuals across your platforms? I would definitely recommend, starting with like a social media audit and asking yourselves these questions, and you can expand that beyond social media. If you're not really a social media user, you could easily ask these of your website, your web presence. You could ask these of a newsletter that you're sending out every month, whatever your kind of really key main form of reaching your audience is, you might want to do an audit and ask these questions. What are you already doing well? I would add in, how do you know, right? Have you been looking at the data? Do you know that it's effective? And then what are the one to two missed opportunities that you can identify? That might be like, the language on my site needs a real good look at. I want to rewrite some stuff, or the photos that I'm using, they're so old, I need to get new ones. I need to kind of mix it up a little bit, try some new things. And then catch up on the current landscape. So thinking about, depending on what your goal is, do you have a certain audience that you really want to reach? What are some really effective ways to reach that audience? Can you do a little bit of digging into where those folks might be, where you might need to have a presence that you don't already, or if you have a presence there, maybe you need to spend a little bit more time on that place because that's really where your audience is. Those are a couple of things to think about. And finally, this is super important, gather your crew, talk to people. Once you kind of do a little audit for yourself and you have a sense of where you want to go and what you want to do, who can help you? How? Who knows more than you, right? Which friends do you have that know more about that particular platform that you want to try to spend more time and attention on? Who fits the kind of audience or client base you're trying to reach? Do you know a few folks who are like your big fans and you want to reach more of those people? Let them in on your process, right? Ask their opinions, see if things are landing for them. Whose opinions do you trust? And this means people that are going to give you an honest take, right? They're going to give you helpful feedback, not just say, oh yeah, it's great. Everything's great. Everything you do is awesome. That's awesome to have people who are encouraging, but it's really the ones where you want their honest feedback, right? Who can tell you where you can improve. So definitely try to think, even just now in your head, who are a few people that you could call on, that could help you with this. So some big takeaways: marketing's an art and a science. It's going to be unique to you, right? Solidify your values-based brand. We all have different areas where we have some missed opportunities. And so doing a little audit, either of social media or of other places where you have a marketing and branding presence, is important. And don't go it alone. Share, practice, get feedback, make a plan, have people comment on it, and it will be all the better for it. You don't have to do it alone. Thank you. And that's my info. And then happy to do a little Q&A. We have a few minutes left. And I would ask just that you think about questions that might be relevant to, to more people, like broader questions rather than something really specific to you. Is very helpful.
Yeah.
Again, yeah, go ahead, Allison.
I was just going to get us started by summarizing one of the earlier questions for you, so you don't have to get caught up reading the chat. Ale was asking about paid social media promotion. I guess they got stuck not being able to access some of their content or something like that. But just to summarize, to make it relevant to the whole group, when, if ever, would it be worth it to pay for social media promotion?
That's a great question. It is so, yeah, it's really hard to figure that out. You know, I was in organizations that spent quite a bit of money on social media promotion, and now I'm in one that we spend very little on social media promotion. I think it depends a little bit on where you are, like what your goal is. Again, if your goal is to get a certain amount of reach on a particular, let's say, important event, you know, that you really like, you really want to get it out there, you want to get it out there to new people, that's really the purpose of that, then it might be worth it to put a little bit of money behind it in terms of boosting it, because it will get out there to more people. If you are, and people have whole careers that are based on like creating really good Facebook ads. So I do recommend like doing a little reading up, you know, on what are some good tips and tricks. There's lots of stuff out there. But the thing to remember is it may boost it and you may get a lot of views, but a lot of that audience may not be relevant depending on how you pick your filters for that ad. So you do have to really think about that. Like, what are your keywords? What are your demographics? Sometimes they have options where it's like friends of your friends. That's always, I find, to be a good option. Or people who are in the more expanded network, you know, of the people you're already connected to. Sometimes that'll do a little bit better. So you know, numbers are not necessarily a good thing all by themselves. You know, it might be nice to be able to say to somebody, oh, this post reached 30,000 people, but if 20,000 of the 30,000 people like are not interested in what you do at all, it's not maybe worth it. So I think carefully about your goal and why you really want to have that kind of reach, and then how you can tell if it did what you wanted it to do, right? So if it is really like about, you know, clicks to your website, then that's another good thing to experiment with. And I would go back to that original thing of experimenting, right? If you're like, okay, I want clicks to my website, I'm going to try to boost a couple of these posts and see what happens. Are you actually getting the clicks? Are you just getting impressions, right? Is it just like 50,000 people saw this, or is it like 20,000 people actually clicked more than did before, you know? And so that'll help you gauge if it's worth it for you or not to really be doing that. And you can experiment with $10, you know, you can do it for very low amounts and see how well it did.
Okay. And Elena had a question that actually might be relevant to a lot of folks. Can you say something about when it might make sense to hire somebody to help you? So if folks are feeling overwhelmed, or they're like, I don't want to spend my time doing this, when would it make sense to hire someone to support you with marketing and branding? And then if you did want to hire somebody, do you have any suggestions on how to find a great person or how to make that decision?
Yeah, I think it's really important to think about, again, what your goal is and where are the areas that are blockers for you. I always think about that, like, why am I putting this off constantly? You know, it's like, because I hate video editing. I hate it, right? And so, like, I know I need to do video. I like actually shooting the footage and I have all of that and I have cool images and all this stuff. But like when it comes to actually getting it on the website, I can't make myself get there, you know? And so then you need a video editor, right? Hire a video editor. So I think really like narrowing in on where the blockers are for you, or like maybe you hate writing the captions for your Instagram or something. And you have a good sense of, you know, what you want to do and where you want to put it. But You just can't be bothered to sit down and write the captions, like I get it. So that is a very specific skill that you might be looking for. I would be wary of hiring like a marketing branding person for everything, because you might want to consider a consultant to help you kind of get launched, but it's not necessarily sustainable for most small business people to do that, at least at first. You may be in a position where you feel like you can do that, but to get somebody really good who's going to be helpful, I mean, that gets expensive. And if that's something you're signing up to long term, that's not necessarily the most sustainable thing for you and for your business. So it's something to really consider heavily, like, what help do I need to make sure this moves along, but to not be completely handing it over to somebody else, because I think you do want to be involved, and it's about you and your core values and your authenticity. So it does need to be something that you're very engaged in, the direction and the strategy that it goes, but absolutely filling the gaps, and with some help. And I think, I mean, honestly, where I've done this in the past is finding folks through recommendations, for sure, is really helpful. Like and being specific again about what you want, if it's really somebody to just work on social media specific stuff or design stuff or video stuff, and then reaching out to your network and getting some good recommendations. We've also, gone to folks who might be attached to a school. Grad students, often have a lot of facility with a lot of these things and maybe looking for a little extra cash. So those are always the best way to do it, I think, too, is getting a recommendation.
Great. Thank you, Sue. Yes, we would definitely uplift the idea that as much information as you can get so that you have more control over your business and you're not losing access to things, not losing access to your website, not losing access to any kind of images or content. That's definitely what the business of art is designed to help folks do, right? We're trying to give you more tools so that you can really be more in control and determine how your art business is going to go. Thank you so much, Sue. If you have lingering questions, folks, you're welcome to sign up for our next Business of Art office hours. If you have questions about the Business of Art specifically, you can email me at allison@cciart.org. Somebody was asking about exercises to refine the tone of their branding. You can find that in the Business of Art book if you want to purchase it. Sue's chapter has some worksheets. And we've dropped a link. Stephanie, my colleague, has dropped a link in the chat to our feedback form. Please, please, please share your feedback with us. This is a new program, the Business of Art Sampler Platter, and so we really want to hear back from you about how it went. Did we meet your expectations? And do you have any recommendations for the future? And so again, thank you, Sue. Thank you, everyone, for attending and participating, and we really appreciate you. Join us next week for pricing your work. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.